So let's begin with the peritoneal cavity. And what we are going to do in this lecture is basically we'll do a recap of the CT anatomy of the peritoneal cavity. We'll see which are the various spaces of the peritoneal cavity and the various peritoneal ligaments that compartmentalize the peritoneal cavity into these spaces. And as we look at the CT anatomy and how these spaces and ligaments look on the CT scans that we're doing, we will try and understand how this anatomy impacts the spread of diseases in the peritoneal cavity. Peritoneum is the largest serous membrane in the human body, and it consists of a single layer of mesothelial cells. Basically, there are two layers. There is the parietal peritoneum, which outlines the anterior abdominal wall and the retroperitoneum, and then there is the visceral peritoneum, which encases the abdominal organs or the abdominal viscera. Between the parietal and the visceral peritoneum, there is a potential space, and that is the peritoneal cavity. Normally, this peritoneal cavity contains a small amount of serous fluid that lubricates the cavity and allows for free movement of the visceral organs. The anatomy of the peritoneal cavity and the flow dynamics of this peritoneal fluid decide how diseases spread within the peritoneal cavity. The peritoneal ligaments, these ligaments, they compartmentalize the cavity. They can be boundaries to disease spread, containing diseases to a certain area within the cavity, or they can be conduits with with the disease spreading along these peritoneal ligaments. What is a peritoneal ligament? Is a double layer of the visceral peritoneum that supports a structure in the peritoneal cavity, and it's typically named after the organs it connects. Omentum is the ligament that connects stomach to another structure, while mesentery is the ligament that connects bowel to the abdominal wall. Normally, if there is fluid, then we are able to identify these ligaments well, but if in the absence of that, we can use blood vessels coursing through the ligaments to identify the peritoneal ligaments. So let's begin with the CT anatomy. The peritoneal cavity is divided by the transverse mesocolon. So that fatty structure is the transverse mesocolon. So it's divided by the transverse mesocolon into a supramesocolic compartment and an inframesocolic compartment. The supramesocolic compartment is divided by falciform ligament into right-sided spaces and left-sided spaces. So on the right side, in the right supramesocolic space, you have the right subphrenic space, the right subhepatic space, which has again an anterior and a posterior division, and the lesser sac. While in the left supramesocolic space, you have the left subphrenic space and the left perihepatic space, both of which have anterior and posterior subdivisions. So let us see how we see these spaces on our CT anatomy. The orange arrows, they point towards the right-sided spaces, while the red arrows point towards the left-sided spaces. So this arrow is the right subphrenic space. It is the space between the right hemidiaphragm and the right lobe of the liver. This space is bounded medially by the falciform ligament, which separates it from the left-sided supramesocolic spaces, and posteriorly by the triangular ligament, which separates the bare area of the liver from the intraperitoneal surface of the liver surface. The subphrenic space communicates freely with the peritoneal space that is along the inferior aspect of the right lobe of the liver, and that is the right subhepatic space. It has an anterior division, which is basically the part of the space that is above the transverse colon and the transverse mesocolon, and a posterior division, which is the Morrison's pouch or the hepatorenal fossa. Again, the subhepatic space and the subphrenic space on the right side communicate with each other and with the right paracolic or the inframesocolic compartment freely. The third space of the right supramesocolic compartment is the lesser sac, that is fluid filled here, and it is bordered by the ligaments, which we will see as we go along in this lecture. This lesser sac is located posterior to the stomach and anterior to the pancreas. And so this is the lesser sac. It communicates with the greater sac by an epiploid foramen, which is located just posterior to the portal triad in the hepatoduodenal ligament. Sorry. On the left supramesocolic compartment, you have the left anterior subphrenic space, which is the space between the left hemidiaphragm and the stomach. This communicates with the left posterior subphrenic space freely, and this is the space that surrounds the spleen and therefore is also called the perisplenic space. This left anterior subphrenic space also communicates with the space that is bordered by the falciform ligament here medially, the diaphragm and the anterior abdominal wall anteriorly and posteriorly by the left lobe of the liver, and this is the anterior division of the left perihepatic space. The left posterior perihepatic space is the space that surrounds the left lobe or the lateral segment of the left lobe of the liver. And this is located anterior to the lesser omentum or the gastrohepatic ligament. The inframesocolic compartment has four spaces, the right infracolic space and the left infracolic space, which are divided by the root of the small bowel mesentery. And then on either side of the ascending and the descending colon, you have the right and the left paracolic gutter. So let's see the CT anatomy. On the lateral sides of the ascending and the descending colon, you have the paracolic gutters, the right one with the orange arrow and the left one with the red arrow. That is the root of the mesentery, going from the ligament of the ligament of Treves to the ileocecal junction there. And this divides the inframesocolic compartment into a smaller right infracolic space and a larger left infracolic space. The pelvic spaces, they are the right and the left paravesical spaces on both sides of the bladder, and posterior to the bladder you have the rectovesical pouch or the utrovesical and the rectouterine pouch. So as the peritoneum goes over the surface of the bladder and over the surface of the uterus and in front of the rectum, you have the uterovesical pouch there and the rectovesical pouch. So these are the two pelvic spaces. And then on the right and the left side, that's the bladder of the urinary bladder, you have the right and the left paravesical spaces. Note that the left infracolic space, that's the root of the mesentery, that's the cecum and the appendix there. So the left infracolic space communicates freely with the pelvic spaces except where it is bordered by the sigmoid mesocolon. So having looked at the anatomy of the peritoneal spaces, just a quick word about clinical significance of these peritoneal spaces. Sometimes when we identify a pathology in a particular space, we can narrow down our differential as to what is the possible etiology and which organ it is coming from. For instance, if you see a lesser sac collection, as in this case, then chances are it's either coming off the pancreas or it is gastric in origin, which was the case in this patient. This was a case of a gastric ulcer perforation, and you can see collection in the lesser sac there. That is the left gastric artery, which is a marker of the lesser omentum or the gastrohepatic rhesus there. Then the other thing is when you see ascites, typically in a transudative ascites, you have a smaller lesser sac component while most of the fluid is in the greater sac. In peritoneal carcinomatosis, you have a similar involvement in both the greater and the lesser sac, while in pancreatitis, you would see a larger lesser sac collection. So this is a patient with CA ovary. You see fluid in the greater sac, and you also see enough amount of fluid in the lesser sac there. While this is a patient with pancreatitis, and you see a large lesser sac collection, a wee bit of fluid in the greater sac as well, rest of the peritoneal cavity. And this air is actually the compressed stomach and not air within this collection. And this is a patient with cirrhosis. Note the nodular surface of the liver, the enlarged left lobe and the caudate lobe. And while you see ascites in the greater sac, you see absolutely no fluid in the lesser sac itself. The other thing about the peritoneal spaces is that the flow in the peritoneal cavity that decides how disease spreads through this cavity, and that is aided by two things. One is there is a downward flow that is aided by gravity, and then there is a cephalad flow that is aided by negative subdiaphragmatic pressure that happens or builds up when we inspire. There are some areas that are particularly prone to lodgement of disease processes in the peritoneal cavity, and typically these are the dependent areas or areas where the lodgement of disease processes happens because of the negative subdiaphragmatic pressure. So these areas include the pelvic spaces, either the rectovesical or the rectouterine pouch, just above the sigmoid mesocolon. So that is another area. Then the inferior aspect of the right infracolic space, that is another area. Then the paracolic gutter and the right subphrenic spaces. So always try and take a look at these regions in the peritoneal cavity to identify for any infective processes or any neoplastic processes. A word about the phrenicocholic ligament and how it divides the or separates out the left paracolic gutter from the left subphrenic spaces, while there's nothing separating out the right paracolic gutter from the right subphrenic space. And this is the reason why you have more disease affection in the right subphrenic space than the left subphrenic space. Let's see what the ligaments look like. So we begin with the suspensory ligaments of the liver. We've already seen the falciform ligament that suspends the liver to the anterior abdominal wall. And then the other ligament is the triangular ligament, both on the right side and on the left side there, that attaches it to the posterior diaphragm and separates out the peritoneal surface of the liver from the bare area of the liver. This is an interesting example where you can see fluid tracking along the falciform ligament there, and there, and reaching up to the umbilicus. So this is a Cullen's sign where you would see discoloration in the periumbilical region. Basically, inflammatory fluid or hemorrhagic fluid can track along the falciform ligament and reach up to the periumbilical region. The lesser omentum. Now, this is an important peritoneal ligament. Since it's the omentum, it connects the stomach to some other structure, which in this case is the left lobe of the liver. It has two components. You can see the lesser omentum outline there. This is the gastrohepatic ligament that connects the lesser curvature of the stomach to the left lobe of the liver. And the free edge of this is the hepatoduodenal ligament, which as you go down, it'll come start off from the proximal duodenum and reach up to the porta hepatis. The vascular landmark for the gastrohepatic ligament is the lesser gastric artery, while for the hepatoduodenal ligament is the portal triad. You can also see in this image, this is the lesser sac, that the lesser omentum forms one of the boundaries of the lesser sac. This is an example of a patient with pancreatic carcinoma where there's involvement of the stomach, adjacent stomach, and there's also involvement of the left lobe of the liver where the disease process takes the course of the lesser omentum to reach the left lobe of the liver. And this is not a intraparenchymal metastatic involvement or a hematogenous involvement, but involvement through the ligament of the adjacent liver surface. The greater omentum, also called the gastrocolic ligament, it's a double layer of peritoneum that starts off from the greater curvature of the stomach, goes anterior to all the bowel loops just beneath the anterior abdominal wall, takes a U-turn back again, and then attaches to the transverse colon. So this is how you see the greater omentum, that is the stomach. From the greater curvature of the stomach, you see that fatty density structure that is going just beneath the anterior abdominal wall in front of the transverse colon and the small bowel loops. So that's the greater omentum. Now, when there is so much fluid and the peritoneal ligaments are not affected primarily by the disease process, then it is easy for us to see these ligaments. But this is not always the case in day to day practice. So, what I would suggest to the younger residents in the audience is start off by seeing a case with a transudative ascites. So, you will end up seeing your anatomy well, and then move on to cases with no ascites. So then, just because you know where the ligament is located and what is the anatomy, you will be able to trace these ligaments better. So, some diseases affecting the greater omentum. This is a patient with an omental hernia in the inguinal canal, and there is an omental infarction, and you see this well marginated, increased attenuation, greater omentum there in that region in a patient who's presented with pain in abdomen. This is tubercular involvement. You see pleural effusion there, some mediastinal lymph nodes, and look what is happening to the greater omentum. There, it is thickened and hazy in its appearance. So this is tubercular involvement. We saw some really wonderful examples of tubercular peritoneal involvement in Dr. Anaga's lecture. And this is another example of a carcinoma stomach where you see a very thick nodular omental caking. Okay, let's move on to some of the other left-sided ligaments, the gastrosplenic ligament, the splenorenal ligament, and the phrenicocholic ligament. So the gastrosplenic ligament, it connects the greater curvature to the spleen, and it is continuous with the greater omentum or the gastrocholic ligament, and it contains the short gastric arteries. So from the stomach to the spleen, that's the gastrosplenic ligament. The splenorenal ligament, it connects the spleen to the tail of the pancreas, and it contains the tail of the pancreas along with distal splenic vessels. And a splenorenal collateral, if it is there in a patient with portal hypertension, would also be seen in the splenorenal ligament. These two ligaments, they form the left lateral boundary of the lesser sac, and we will see these ligaments in the next slide shortly. The phrenicocholic ligament, this was the ligament that we saw that separates out the left paracholic gutter from the left subphrenic space. This is again continuous with the splenorenal ligament and with the transverse mesocolon. So let's identify these on our CT anatomy. That was the stomach, that was the greater omentum. Continuous with the greater omentum, you see this fatty density ligament that is joining the stomach to the spleen, and that is the gastrosplenic ligament. And this ligament continues with another fatty ligament that houses the tail of the pancreas, and that is the splenorenal ligament. And as you go downward from there, you see this little fat density outpouching, and that is the phrenicocholic ligament, and that is continuous with the transverse mesocolon there. And this is just an example of a pancreatic mass lesion that across the splenorenal ligament is affecting the spleen. Now, note that the gastrosplenic ligament and the splenorenal ligaments, these form the boundaries of the lesser sac. We saw that this was the lesser omentum. This is the lesser sac, the gastrosplenic and the splenorenal ligament form the boundaries of the lesser sac. And this lesser sac is inferiorly bordered by the transverse mesocolon. So let's come to the transverse mesocolon. It attaches the transverse colon to the retroperitoneum and contains the middle colic vessels, which is the landmark for the transverse mesocolon. Again, we've seen that it is continuous with the splenorenal and phrenicocholic ligament. And at the level of the uncinate process, it fuses with the small bowel mesentery. This is a ligament that is used as a mode of disease spread in pancreatic pathologies, whether it is pancreatic carcinoma or pancreatitis. So let's identify the ligaments again: the greater omentum, the gastrosplenic ligament, the splenorenal ligament there. And as we go down, we start to see that's the transverse colon, and that fat density that suspends this transverse colon and houses the middle colic artery, that is the transverse mesocolon. And see how the splenorenal ligament is continuous with the transverse mesocolon there. So this is an example of a patient with pancreatitis, and you see inflammatory exudates that are taking the course of the transverse mesocolon to cause inflammatory thickening of the transverse colon. That's inflammatory thickening of transverse colon there. The small bowel mesentery starts off from the ligament of Treats to at the DJ flexure to the ileocecal region, and it suspends the small bowel in the abdominal cavity. The superior mesenteric vessels are the hallmark for this ligament, and it is very easy to identify the small bowel mesentery on your CT scan. So this is an example of a patient with pancreatitis, and you can also see that there are some mesenteric collections there. That is because of the proximity at the level of the uncinate process of the mesentery with the retroperitoneal space. The sigmoid mesocolon, we saw that it borders the left infracolic space. This suspends the sigmoid colon to the posterior pelvic wall, like that there, and it is a common site of affection in diseases of the sigmoid colon, whether it is an infective process such as diverticulitis or it is sigmoid colon carcinomas. So this is an example with a patient who's got a diverticular abscess, and you can see how that abscess is localized to the region of the sigmoid mesocolon and not spreading across the peritoneal cavity.